Welcome to Stitching Up Trouble, a podcast where a quilt retreat owner and a creative quilt designer cross paths and stitch up some trouble together. I am Mary, owner of Coosa Mountain Lodge.
And I'm Heidi Pridemore of the Whimsical Workshop. Hope you enjoy. Hey Mary, how are you?
I am good. Heidi, how are you today?
Good. It's been a little while. We kind of...
Has.
I was on the road forever, and now we're back.
And I had a busy weekend. Adam and I hung up the frame for one of the design walls that's going in the new retreat. And we also made the pegboard that is going up. That's already been hung up. So as soon as I get to either, Home Depot or someplace that'll sell the little hooks for the pegboard, that'll be ready to go to hang up all the rulers and stuff that I have for the new place. So
exciting.
Really excited. Yeah.
I know you don't think about how long those little tasks can take, but they can take forever.
Yeah. It took quite a bit of time. So we were supposed to talk and maybe record on Sunday.
Yeah.
I
ended up, I had a class. That's why I'm like, what was Sunday? I had a class.
Yeah. And then I ended up at the new building working on some of that stuff.
And so for all our listeners, make sure you're following her over on Instagram because you have been documenting this all along so people can go back into your thing and see it. But now it's like every time you post, I'm like so excited because I just saw the one the other day with the huge vaulted ceiling. I'm like, holy moly. My he's an architect, and I looked at him and I said, is that structurally sound to have no center post? He's like, oh yeah, you can do that. I'm like, oh, okay. Because it makes the space look so amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
It's incredible. It's cliche to say, but pictures don't do it justice because
because when you're standing in the space.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then they did the kitchen floor yesterday.
Ooh.
Which, each thing they do makes it feel more and more real. So
which area of the retreat is mostly, which area is, closest to being done? The classroom, the bedrooms, the kitchen? Are they all kind of even?
They're all kind of even. He did the kitchen floor yesterday, so now he can get the cabinets in, and once the cabinets are in, then he can order the countertops. So
okay.
Once that's done, then I can really kind of start to move into the kitchen because he won't need to be in there anymore. So I think he'll finish up the kitchen and then move on to the bedrooms. So the ceilings in all the bedrooms are done. The next thing he'll have to do is the floors and the trim.
Right.
And he's pretty fast at floors, so he should be able to get those done pretty quickly.
Because countdown has begun.
Yeah. So 3 weeks. So hopefully we'll see if it gets done. But anyway, so we've been busy to take time and sit down and take a breath and be able to have a nice chat. This is a nice treat from all the craziness.
From the go. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's just been, normally summers are my slow time, and this summer has just been amazingly busy. Very much. I think I might have said in the last one, I have 6 trips, I think, between now and December 1st. Including the one coming to you, 6 or 7. I'm in California. I'm going to be in Nashville. I'm going to be in Georgia. I'm going to be in Seattle. I'm missing a couple.
What are you doing in Nashville?
There is the OESD. No, not OESD. It's the Nashville Sewing Festival. But you guys have you have one in Atlanta too, and I can't think of the Original Sew and Craft Festival. Is that what it's called? I think.
Yes.
And I'll be there as a Janome educator and.
Oh, okay. Cool.
A booth. So I'll be there for a week. So if anyone's in Nashville, come by and say hi, because that's where I'll be for a whole week.
Nice.
You can't miss me. I'll be the really short one in the Janome booth. So, but anyway, so
very cool.
Yeah, a lot. You're not traveling right now, though. You don't travel till later in fall.
Correct. I don't have any trips planned until I think we're going somewhere over Thanksgiving.
That's a long time for you to sit still.
It is.
It took building an entire building to get you to stay put. So I know my sister asked today about the dates for November, which we are sad and excited to say that is sold out. So
yes, we are
if you
booked.
Want to come to a retreat with us, we now have next year, you can reach out to Mary at kusamountainlodge.com. We do have dates for that, and we just picked 2027 dates, which are not open yet, but we just picked them. So, all right. So today, what are we talking about, Mary?
Today we are talking about unpopular quilting practices and opinions. I don't really like to do things the way everybody does them sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit stubborn. I like to do things my way.
Not Mary. No way.
Sometimes it turns out really well and sometimes not.
Mm-hmm.
But I have different opinions on different topics for quilting. So I thought that we would kind of have a discussion about that. And maybe
this is a good one.
If our opinions don't match up, maybe you can give me the reason why your way is better.
Okay. Well,
because I won't argue that my way is better. I'll just argue that it works for me.
Yeah. And you don't even argue. Mary's very quiet. She just continues to do it her way even after you say, no, really, you should do it. Now, that being said, my way is not always right either because I quilt for business. I quilt for money. So time is money. So I do take shortcuts. I do certain things that I actually, when I teach a class, would tell my students do not do. But I think we were talking about this before we started. I think if you understand the logic behind why things are recommended, then you can choose. You can pick and choose what rules, not rules, because there are no rules in quilting, but what techniques you follow or don't follow. I think that's a nice conversation. I hope we learn something from it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Okay, so, and you are, let's just put this out there. You are a long arm quilter and you long arm quilt for customers.
Yes.
So your perspective is not only from a personal sewer, your perspective is from someone who has to take quilt tops from customers and make them work. And I honestly think a lot of the things that we're going to talk about don't necessarily show up until you get to the quilting part. And then whoever's stuck quilting it has to deal with some of it.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to throw your expertise out there so people don't just, because I just looked at number one and I'm like, ooh, Mary's going to have something to say about this one.
Yeah, I do have opinions about things. So basically, the first one that I wrote down is that quilts don't have to be perfectly squared up. And as a long armor for myself, and for other people that don't necessarily follow the rules all the time, I can make your quilt look really pretty if it's not square. Like, it's okay. Unless you're hanging it on a wall, you can't really tell that it's not perfectly square. And in order to square up certain quilts, if you're squaring it up, if you're strictly trying to make it square, you're going to be cutting off some of the design. And that will be way more noticeable than if it's not square. Especially if it's on a bed or if somebody's curled up with it on the couch. You'll notice that half of your points are cut off because you cut them off to square it up. You're not going to notice that the edge is a little wonky. So I don't think quilts have to be perfectly squared. It's very helpful if they're not wavy.
Flat is better than square.
Correct.
Yeah.
I can make a flat quilt look beautiful anytime. If it's perfectly squared, but you had to get waves in it to make the outside square, that doesn't quilt up as nicely as if it's flat.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that some people consider a square quilt as like the gold standard, but it doesn't have to be square. It just should be as flat as you can make it. So, and if it's not flat, that's okay too. Mm-hmm. Like, I can still quilt it and make it beautiful. I might have to take a tuck in the border and I'll try to make it look natural or, try to minimize
the effect of
the tuck. But I think sometimes people don't bring their quilts in to get them quilted because they're not perfect.
Okay.
And I would much rather deal with somebody's wonky quilt and quilt it into submission than have somebody have all these quilt tops that they're too worried about to bring in and get quilted. So I'm not ever going to judge you for your quilt wonkiness or whatever. Just let's get your quilts done. So that's, I know, like, I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of a quilter. I know that there are a lot more meticulous quilters out there. And if you're quilting for a show quilt, or if you're doing, intricate custom quilting, yes, you want your best work, and that affects it a lot more. But if you're doing just a basic edge to edge on a quilt, just get it quilted. Like,
Right.
finish your quilt. It's not doing anybody any good in your closet not quilted. So bring it to me.
Well, and
I'll
I
make
have
it.
a saying in all my classes that done is better than perfect.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so for quilts that don't have to be squared up, I agree with all of what you just said. Now,
Hallelujah.
I know, but there are ways to achieve a square quilt by not waiting till the end. So when I teach, like, I have students, we will do our blocks. We have our little 10-inch blocks. They want to square up each block. And I say, no, do not do that. And this is going to possibly be controversial as well, is because if you've cut all your pieces correctly and you've sewn fairly well with a 1/4-inch seam, again, we got to remember it's not rocket science. If you square up that block, you are now cutting all those pieces wrong. You've now skewed the block to make it square. And the other thing a lot of people don't realize is cotton has a memory. So when you finish your block and you press it nice and flat and you square it up, when it relaxes and goes loosey-goosey, it's not square anymore. And then when you sew unsquare blocks together, you end up with an unsquare top. So to achieve a square top, you actually want to start with your block and not square your block up. And it's counterintuitive to think of that. But if you've cut all your pieces correctly and you've sewn fairly accurately, and then you square it, you are messing up all the hard work you just did. And you lose your points, which I agree with you. So the only time that you really need to think about a square quilt is, like you said, if it's going to hang on a wall. The smaller it is, the more important that it's squarish. The bigger it is, no one is ever going to notice if it's not square. So enjoy it and not stress. And I do tell all my students, the quilter will work on that. The quilter will fix it. Because you know what? I don't quilt them.
Yeah. Well, I do.
Yeah.
And,
so we agree on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
not all quilters do. Like, I would say most of the long arm quilters will be like, if you disagree with me, please comment. Let's have a conversation about it, because I would like, the interaction and the feedback. But for me personally,
right. The thing I tell my students when I start teaching, especially if it's a class that we need some perfection into it, like we need things to be like a more intermediate class, I always say that I apologize at the beginning of the class. And I say, there are levels of perfection, 1 to 10. I am a number 5. You have a number 5 perfection teacher. So anybody who's perfection above 5, I apologize. And I see nothing wrong. My best friend, she is so meticulous. Like, every little bit is perfect. But it does take her a really long time to make a quilt. And her quilts are beautiful. I think that quilt is just as beautiful as a beginner quilt that's a little bit wonky and has character. And, and that's the thing. You can tell people it has character. I made it this way. But no one's ever going to notice it's not square when you get past a wall hanging.
Right. Exactly.
Now, if you're putting it in a show or you're doing all this, that's a whole nother realm. This conversation isn't for them. This conversation is for all of us regular day-to-day quilters who are just making quilts for people we love. So, wow, we agree. I'm surprised.
Whew.
Not that we agreed on anything, but that we agreed on that one. So
right. Yes.
Okay. Number 2 is gonna. Number two is gonna get some people going.
This is I'm being very courageous coming out with this one. This is something I try to hide. I don't sew borders on at retreats because I don't want people to see how I do borders. So,
and see, looking ahead, I'm even more fly by the seat than you are, and I teach it. So you hide it, and I'm like, yeah, no, look, this is how you do it.
Okay. So I do not measure my borders before I sew them on.
Nope.
Sew the long strip on, and I schwack it off at the end, which is, see, yeah.
We'll give you some tips on that, Mary.
But because I am my own long armor, so I'm very careful not to pull and stretch and distort either of the fabrics. And I cut it off square at the end. So I'm not, I somewhat pay attention to that. And I've been doing my own long arming for a long time, and I have not had any issues with that. So that I know I'm going to get hate mail for that, and that's fine too.
Hey, these are our personal opinions, and we're doing a
But
podcast where we're supposed to share our personal opinions. So no hate mail.
so this is my, so it works for me. Um, I've had good results with it. Okay. So I have had multiple customers bring me quilts where they have done the borders the right way, and they've been very wavy and very difficult to quilt. Now, I think part of the problem is that their quilt top was not square before they tried sewing the borders on. Okay. So if you have a quilt top so the correct way, and I'm doing the little air quotes, the correct way to do borders is you measure the top, the middle, and the bottom, and you take the average. You cut your border to that size, and then, start in the middle and pin it to the outside and ease it in, and then your borders are the same. Heidi's shaking her head. So it works really well if your quilt is basically square. So if your quilt in the center is 50 inches and the top is 49 and a half and the bottom is 50 and a half, and you average that to 50, then you have a half inch to ease in or stretch out on the top and bottom, and it'll be okay. Okay. But if your middle of your quilt is 50 and your top is 52 and your bottom is 48, you have an average of 50, but you have to take and get a border that's 50 inches long to stretch to cover a 52-inch side, or to ease in and cover a 48-inch side. So that's when your borders get really wavy. So there needs to be some sort of common sense. So not measuring your top, middle, and center is not always a good technique for putting on your borders.
Well, and it takes a really long freaking time to do it.
It does.
And you got to have a big old space to lay it out. And you got to have good knees to crawl around on the floor. These are all things that mean people hate putting borders on quilts.
Right.
So I'm not as radical as you. I don't just sew it on and chop it off. I think we talked about this at one of the retreats. So see, this is one of those ones where I pointed out a better way, and she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm doing my way."
Well, okay. I have tried your way, and I don't hate it.
Okay. So I totally agree with you. That is where the wavy borders come from. I also tell people, even though we write patterns and we say it in the pattern, that's because it's traditionally said, I never cut my borders to length. I'll cut the width, like if you need 6 inch by 80 or whatever, I will cut enough strips and make them 6 inches, and I'll sew the strips together so it's like 86 or 88. I make it longer than it needs to be. None of us are perfect. So none of our quilts are going to measure exactly what the pattern tells you it's going to measure, which is where the whole rule of, I want to know who came up with measure the center and the two sides, because that person's lore has lasted for a very, very long time. I pin my border on. I start at one edge and I pin it, and then I chop off the excess. And the reason I do that is because now there's more and more machines, as I point to my new beautiful machine over here, more and more machines that have dual feed, so the fabric is going in it consistently. But if you're dealing with anything that doesn't have a dual feed, the feed dogs are pulling the bottom faster than the top, and you will get drag, and you can get wavy borders. If you at least pin even if it's every 12 inches, it doesn't have to be like every 2 inches. If you pin it and then trim it, you will not have waves. I'm not going to guarantee a square quilt, but you will not have waves. So that is how I do it, is I start at one end, pin it, and cut it so that it's cut to size. And I do it for each side. You can fold the quilt in half on the ironing board and see if there's a disparaging thing. But again, like we just go back to point one, if it's a big quilt, we don't care if it's square. But if you actually pin, or I'm not sure I could say sew it on and chop it off, but if you pin your border and trim them, they will be flat, which is what Mary has already said is more ideal than square. Flat is better than square. And if you watch any of my 300 plus videos about quilting, you will constantly hear me about let's make the block flat. Let's make the quilt flat, because I agree with you. The flat is going to make it look nicer, easier to quilt. So I would say that when we kind of agree. We agree the traditional correct method, perfect for perfectionists, But for the rest of us, don't kill yourself on your borders. Like, make the borders fit what you've sewn, not what the pattern says. Don't cut your borders to length. Make those borders fit what you've sewn. Because if you've sewn 1/8 of an inch off through the entire quilt, you've probably added the 2 inches you're talking about.
Right.
And you're not going to go back and undo the whole quilt because it comes out longer. You're just going to make that border fit. So I will share the hate mail with you. How's that?
I will say that your technique probably works better for most people.
It's a compromise between your technique and the strict and hard, school marm technique.
Right.
It's in the middle.
So
guys, do with it as you wish.
Very solid middle ground.
Well, and I've been doing that. I probably did the first couple hundred quilts using the traditional method. And I constantly was just like, I was running into waves. I was running it because I was a beginner and I was having trouble. And I think I finally just got to the point where I'm like, this does not work for me, so I'm going to pick my method. And it sounds like you did the same thing. You're like, I do not have the patience to do this. I'm going to pick my own method. There is no right or wrong way to put borders on. There are just ways that you're going to end up wavier or less wavy. And it doesn't matter if you do the true traditional technique or one of ours, you could still end up with waves. And that also comes down to the weight of the fabric. I don't know if people know this. If your quilt is made with high-end quilting cotton, and you're trying to find the perfect border, and you go buy lower grade cotton, and you put that on your quilt borders, it will wave, because the weave is a different weight. So that is true about quilting blocks. It's true about anything in sewing. When you mix weights of quality of fabric, you have to be careful, because the lower the weight, the more stretchy it is, and the more likely it can ripple. That's not saying you can't use lesser expensive fabric. Just be aware of when you feel it. If one feels really thin and one feels thicker, know they're going to need a little more attention when you sew them together. So it's not always everybody's fault how they sewed their borders on. It could just be the fabric's fault.
It could be. So when you have two different weights of fabric and you're trying to combine them, would you maybe starch the lighter weight fabric a little bit more, or
no? Because now you're again distorting the cotton, which when it relaxes is going to go back to its normal shape. What I tell people is when you're dealing with it, whenever possible, put the lighter weight fabric on top and the heavier weight fabric on the bottom. It acts like a stabilizer, the heavier weight, and it's less likely to distort the piece. Because I'll do quilts with flannel and cotton, or I'll do quilts with batiks and flat cotton. Those could all be, so you shouldn't really go by quality. Those are different weights of fabric, but I always will put the heavier piece on the bottom to act as a stabilizer. So you don't need to do anything fancy to the fabric.
That makes sense.
Okay, next one.
The next one. So I do not buy the backing suggested in the quilt pattern.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I never know what size my quilts are going to end up being. Sometimes a pattern will not call for a border, and I like borders on my quilts. I like wide borders on my quilts. So I will typically add a wider border than what it calls for. So I don't go by the pattern when I'm buying my backing. Even if I'm not going to add a border, I buy more backing than it calls for. As a long armor, I like to limit the number of seams in my backings, and I like to piece it so that I have a horizontal seam when I load the quilt on the quilter. So I will buy my backings according to that. I also was taught to quilt by my mother, who said if the pattern calls for 1.5 by 2 yards, your favorite phrase should be, I'll just take the rest of it. So I tend to buy a little bit more fabric than I need, and it's come in handy several times. So I would not suggest going strictly by the pattern when you pick out your backings, because not everybody who writes patterns does long arming, and they may not include enough to make your long armor happy.
So from the pattern writing perspective, the industry standard that I think everybody who works in the industry, so this is not a pattern designer who hasn't worked with a fabric company. They don't have anyone putting industry standards on them. But the industry standard is we add 8 inches to the finished size of the quilt to get to our backing. So you have 4 inches on all 4 sides. That's what, like the free projects we do, that's what they require. That all being said, I agree. When you're buying your backing fabric, you can do 2 things. One, you can just add an extra half yard or yard to the backing if you know you're going to make it the size you want. 2, open the pattern. I don't know of any quilt shop that won't let you open the pattern and see how they tell you how to piece the back. Because we do a way where we actually cut 2 full pieces that you sew together to make your back. You will always have a ton of extra with our backing. But if you open it up and there's like 5 different pieces you have to cut for your backing, ooh, that's like a warning sign, you know.
Yeah, that's bad.
You know, then go buy that. And I have a video for how we do our backing that I can link on YouTube to this. I can't do it on podcast. I don't know how to do it. But you can go to the Whimsical Workshop YouTube channel and it's how to piece your backing. It's a very nice way to do it because you always will have enough fabric, but it also tells you how to figure out your backing. So if you're like Mary, you put really wide borders on and now you got to figure it out. There's a little formula there. Very easy. Trust me. No math really required. But I agree with that because you don't know, you know, every pattern writer, it's their personality in that pattern. And you don't know which one you've got. So if you don't want to buy the suggested pattern, at least have that how to figure out your backing fabric formula so you can do it yourself. Because once you know how to do it, you don't need the pattern to tell you how to do it. Yeah, and don't listen to anyone who tells you you only need 2 inches of backing. I mean, that's okay for placemats or wall hangings or something you're going to quilt on your machine. But the bigger the quilt, the more important that 4 to 6 inches. Is that what you guys, would you like to see is like 4 to 6 inches or do you like even more?
4 to 6 inches is good. Like, I like the 6 inches. It's helpful because, so one thing, when you load a quilt on a quilting frame and you kind of stretch it so that it's a little taut, but not, like you don't want it stretched. The number of seams in your top is different than the number of seams in the backing. So when you get it so that it's flat and stretched out a little bit, your top will actually stretch more compared to the backing.
Right, because you have more points of stretch.
So now I don't like pull on the tops and
all the seams will pop.
Right, I don't do that, but you do have to get it where it's a little taut, you know, where it's a little bit tight. So that will change the dimension of your top. And if you're only giving me 2 or 3 inches on the top and bottom, that's not enough for me to even attach it to the rails of the quilt. So what I do a lot of times is I add a bit extra, so maybe even 8 inches, 6 to 8 inches on either side. And then when I trim my quilt, whatever I trim off, that becomes my binding. So it's not necessarily wasted fabric, it's binding.
And that was the other reason I said to buy more backing. If you have any need, want, or desire to put a sleeve on the back, you want your sleeve to match your backing. So because 90% of what we make has to get hung at shows, I always up that backing so I have enough for a sleeve. So yeah, you can use it for binding, you can use it for the sleeve. You can, you don't want to buy an extra fabric that's wasteful, so that also forces you to buy a really pretty backing that you can use somewhere else.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we kind of agreed on that one too.
Awesome.
Not a lot of controversy in this podcast today.
Well, not between us.
No.
Maybe from the listeners.
Hey.
So hopefully we will get some of that feedback.
Yeah. Every quilter has their own personality, their own way of doing things. What you do in the privacy of your sewing room is between you and your sewing room. It's like Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Exactly.
There is no person that is the god of quilting or the goddess of quilting that has the rules that you have to follow. There are certain crafts where rules are important, but quilting has not come across as one for me. It's very personal. You can make it very personalized in how you do things. So
absolutely.
But I can see reading ahead. I'm not agreeing with the next one. So go for it.
So this is my own little thing that I don't know. There's enough of my grandma left in me that I cannot not do this. So grandma, she lived 3 days short of her 100th birthday. Wow. She quilted, she crocheted, she raised 9 kids. My grandfather passed away when my youngest uncle was 3. So she lived on a farm and raised kids and did not waste anything, like nothing. So when I am doing like a snowball quilt,
Yep.
snowballing the corners, I always sew that extra seam a half inch in. So when I cut off the corners, I have a half square triangle already made of the tiny little scraps. And I have thousands of them now, and I cannot not do it.
So what are
Like,
you going to do with all of them?
so I have used them a couple of times in the borders of the quilts
Okay.
and made pinwheels like in the corners of the borders. And then I really want to make one of those quilts where it's all the little half square triangles and the darks are all facing one side and the lights are facing another.
Right. Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a postage stamp like that. So when I just like need to have like a mindless, give me 15 minutes of calm, I will trim those down to 1.5 inches and press them, and I have them
Well, I'm going to
in
gift you.
envelopes and whatever. But
I'm going to
it's
gift you this project I'm working on. Okay. It's all
okay.
snowflakes. Okay. I think, let's see, there are over 1,000 flip and sews that I'm doing for this quilt. I'm going to have so many of these little triangles. You are going to be therapeutic for a year. But
So
I
are
will
you
bring
sewing
you
that?
these.
Are you sewing the extra seams so that when you cut it off, they're already sewn together?
Hell no. I'm giving you that.
What? Before you cut it off, you sew it
That's
together.
twice as much work.
Well, that's why it's unpopular, and that's my thing. That
Remember what I said earlier in the podcast? Time is money for me.
I know. That's why I was going to be really impressed that you would do that for me.
I love you, but not that much. No, no, that is definitely, it is a great way to like get extra
Yeah.
little blocks that you have to go do something with. But yeah, and do I feel bad with all of these? I do. And I do put them all in a bag because we donate our fabric to this lady who organizes it. Her name's Sue. Hi, Sue. And she organizes it and gives it to the charities and stuff. But I let her like also pull out what she wants.
Right.
And if I keep those on a bag, she will sit and sew and turn it into a beautiful quilt. Like she will do something. She calls them garbage quilts. I love that. The garbage quilts,
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't join you in that world. Maybe when I retire, but no.
It's an obsession. I get it. It's bizarre. I can't bring myself to not do it.
And there are a lot of people who do that, though.
Yeah.
There are. So I'm going to throw in a real short story here. My very first time teaching, I was nervous. I think I was 30. I was young, the young days. And I'm OCD. So I was cleaning things up and trying to keep the classroom fairly clean so that at the end of the class, I didn't have to like do everything. And I went along and I scooped everybody's scraps into the trash. First class, I got my hand physically slapped, and they said, "Do not ever throw people's scraps away." And I was like, okay. So now I always ask. I still have the habit of picking them up, but I'm like, if is there someone in here who, wants the scraps or whatever? And we just go that route. But yeah, don't ever pick up other people's scraps because that's their treasures, and they will become violent.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So I have an Afghan that my grandmother crocheted. She did granny squares. Okay. And the 4 petals in the center of the granny square on a lot of the blocks are 4 different colors.
Oh, yeah, you're like your grandmother.
She had a piece of yarn like 6 inches long, and she used that up. She wasted nothing. So, that's where I get it. And she was a lovely woman and meant very much to me. So I'm proud to have a piece of her with me. Kind of wish it was maybe like her cooking skill and not so much.
No, Adam wishes it was your cooking skill.
So, but anyway, that's my little thing. I can't not do it. So,
gosh. All right. Well, there's one that, you are more than welcome to do it. I'm happy to send you unsewn half triangles, but I can't join you there. That is way too tedious for me. That is yeah. Anyway, all right, so leave a comment below. Are you Mary? Are you Heidi when it comes to... Do you donate all your scraps to somebody, or do you do stuff with your scraps? And we're talking little scraps. I'm not talking like quarter yard. I'm talking...
Yeah, little. And what do you do with them? If you're donating them or giving them away, what do you do with your scraps? Like
Yeah.
your tiny, unusable scraps. I
Yeah.
would like
Well,
to know.
some people would tell me every scrap is usable.
Well, they're wrong.
Well, no, there's people that take like the thread scraps, all the extra thread, and they thread paint it onto like water soluble. They make their own fabric out of the thread. I have seen every part. It's kind of like
Okay.
the restaurants that use whole animal from, snout to tail to cook all their meals. There are people who will use every element of the leftovers from quilting and sewing. I am impressed. I am glad they're out there. I'm just not going to be one of them.
I'm curious to learn more about them, though. I
Yeah,
would like
so
to
if you
know.
are one of those people, we are calling you up and saying, leave us a comment. What do you
Yeah.
do with your
What do you
scraps?
do?
So,
What do you do?
all right, so let's do the last one so we can wrap this one up.
The
We're having
last
way too much
one,
fun talking here.
the last one is if I don't like how the instructions are written,
hmm
I ignore them and make up my own.
Okay. And
So
I can agree. When you say make up your own, you're still targeting the picture. Like you're trying to
I am
make with the.
still
Okay.
targeting the picture,
Okay.
but
And
I
I
am not
torturing yourself through the entire pattern.
correct. So, for example, this I bought this pattern and it was made of all hexagons that were made out of two different fabrics. And in the pattern, it said to cut a 60-degree triangle and to make this template and cut this trapezoid and sew the triangle to the trapezoid. No, no. You strip piece that and you cut the whole strip into the triangles and use the pieces that you're supposed to use and move on. Like, I am not going to cut a template if I don't have to. So, and then there's other ones like I got a pattern that was supposed to be layer cake friendly. And the first thing it said to do was to trim the 10-inch squares down to 9.5. And there was not a reason to do it. Like you weren't, so if you were taking
Were you
two
cutting
5-inch
the nine and a
squares,
half from something else?
were
Or
you
were
cutting
you
them into,
taking that 9.5 and sewing it?
you were basically you were cutting it down to 9.5 and then you were sewing strips around it.
Okay. Well, I think a lot of people put that in just because when they first came out, layer cakes were not. They could be from 9.5 to 10.5.
Right.
So it could be a
But
carryover. Look, I'm trying to
but
solve the problem.
there's a difference between saying make sure your
Mm-hmm.
squares are 10 if they're
Right.
not, trim them all to 9.5,
Right.
and saying okay, take your 10-inch squares and trim a half inch off of all of them for no reason. So if you were taking two 5-inch squares, sewing those together and then sewing it on the 10-inch block,
That would make sense.
yes, that makes sense, but that's not what they were doing.
Okay.
So
They were just having you neaten everything up.
right, I'm not doing that. So
Well, I agree because coming from being a pattern writer myself, we are also asked a lot of times to make quilts from other people's patterns. And if it is convoluted, the cutting is sprinkled through the pattern, nothing makes me crazier than that.
yeah,
Or it's just a different writing style. There's nothing wrong with it. I will take the time and write out the cutting. And a lot of times there's techniques that are different than I would do, but the end result is still a 3-inch half square triangle. I'm going to use the one I'm most comfortable with. You just have to make sure you have enough fabric. So when we do jobs for people, we always ask for an extra quarter to half yard of every cut so we can do that. But, I would agree with you on that one. If you are struggling with a pattern, hopefully it's not one of mine, but if you're struggling with a pattern, sit down. I mean, you should do that before you start a project anyway. Fabric is way too expensive. You should sit down and go through the pattern first just to make sure you know the lay of the land, just to make sure you understand what's going on. Or like we're saying, you're not comfortable with the pattern or you don't like something about the pattern. If you go through the whole thing, then you can know, well, if I change step 2, it's not going to burn me on step 9.
exactly.
So, yeah,
Yes.
Don't change part of the pattern and then get upset when it does not work.
Correct. Yeah.
So, yeah.
But yeah, I do. And the cutting instructions,
Mm-hmm.
there are patterns that will tell you specifically cut this many strips and cut 2 of the strips into, 8.5 inch lengths and 3 into this much and whatever. I really prefer patterns that just tell me your backing fabric, you need 8.5 inch strips, 26.5 inch strips. Give me my goal and let me figure out how to get there.
We'll see. Now, I write my patterns the way that you just said you don't like it. And part of that is for internal use as well, because we break it down so that when we check the yardage on the pattern, we can just go through that first column and say, they need this many strips, this many, this many, this many, and we can add it up. And that one, I think, is a personal preference. I think it really comes down to, there are, like, when we deal with fat quarters or scrappy stuff, it's hard to do a strip count because it shouldn't be a strip count.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of going to be like potato. I'm sure there's quite a few people out here who agree with you and just want to know, I need to cut 4.5 by 6.5. I need to cut this. I need to cut this. I need to cut this. And then there's the other ones that are like, no. I want to know how many strips I cut down.
Yeah.
And but I can see where that would confuse some people. My bugaboo is don't scatter the cutting through the pattern.
Yeah, that's a bad one. Yeah, don't do
that. And
I
tell people all the time, you want to cut your quilt all at the same time. That does not mean stand there for 5 hours and cut, take breaks. But before you sew, go through your cutting and get your pieces cut. You're less likely to make a mistake in cutting. You're less likely to not know where your parts are because you can't remember if you've cut it or not. You're less likely to double cut. I'm tempted every once in a while to try it the other way. And I'm like, what are you thinking, Heidi? Don't do that. Well, I think that was... I enjoyed that conversation.
I did too. I like how much you agreed with me. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, again, we just have to remember quilting is it's your hobby. You're doing it because you love it. So if there's a task in that whole thing that you are not enjoying, one, look at other ways to do the task that might be more enjoyable. And two, do not have your first quilting teacher in your ear telling you, no, you have to do it this way. There is nothing in this world. Well, okay, there's probably some things, but there's nothing in quilting that has to be done a certain way every single time. You may need to do some creative problem solving. You may decide the original way. Oh, now I know why they do it. But the fastest way to know why you do something is to not do it. You will learn. But fabric is expensive, so make those lessons easy. And if you do change a pattern, that's the other thing. Make a test block. You should always make a test block. I tell everybody to make a test block. Do I make a test block? Never. But that's another way to avoid mistakes.
Yeah, so, definitely.
Yeah. I take that back. When I did the one that hopefully I'll get to show you guys next year when the book comes out, it was an English paper piece queen size quilt or twin size quilt. And I had to do the whole thing on the machine with Y seams. I did a test block. I made sure I could do what theoretically I was thinking I could do. So always test your theories on cheap fabric before you jump in.
Yes, absolutely.
That's my last piece of advice for you guys.
That's very good. All right.
Well,
thank you, Heidi. This was fun.
It was fun. I told you I was grumpy at the start, and now I'm not grumpy anymore. So thank you.
That's good. That's good. So, like always, subscribe, share, comment. Your comments and your likes and shares really help us out. And we
want you guys involved in the conversation. And so please send us some comments. Tell us topics you want to hear us talk about. Believe it or not, this is episode 22. We have done 21 of these.
20.
Well, technically, I think we did 24 because 3 kept. Yeah.
And we cannot record an episode without saying hi to Shannon at the Comments Red in Dahlonega, Georgia. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Shannon. I'm going to come see you in November. So, yeah, it's getting closer. I have like 5 trips before I get there, but I can't wait. All right. So we will see you guys in the next one, and happy sewing.
Happy sewing. Bye, everybody.
Bye.